Hi, I'm Jeremy, the Zoo Nerd, coming to you live from my backyard in beautiful Los Angeles, California. How's everybody doing today? I hope you're well. I hope you're happy, healthy, and having some fun. Today on Critter Chat, since it's Catterday, we're going to talk about the most abundant wildcat in the United States. Today we're talking about bobcats. Bobcats live throughout North America, from about the middle of Mexico up to the areas of southern Canada, including all 48 of the contiguous United States. They do not live in Alaska, they do not live in Hawaii, but they are in the other 48. They live in a wide variety of habitats: mountains, forests, swamps, deserts, the plains, and in cities. Bobcats are very well adapted to living in many different places, although they have some variation and differences depending on where they live. You will find bigger bobcats further north and in colder climates. So like the desert bobcats and the bobcats in like the Florida swamps are going to be a bit smaller than their northern cousins. Bobcats are about twice the size of a house cat. They stand between 1.5 to 2 feet off the ground at their shoulder, so their head's going to be a bit higher. And they are between 26 and 41 inches in length, so they have a pretty big variety of how big they can look. And their tails are usually between like 4 and up to maybe 9 inches long. Sorry, had bad connection, repositioned. Hopefully this works out better. Bobcats' tails are pretty short. That's a key point in trying to figure out if what you're looking at is a bobcat, because a house cat or any wild version of what was a house cat is going to have a pretty long tail for the most part, long enough that it could touch the ground if the cat let it drag. Same with other wildcat species, particularly mountain lions, cougars, whatever you call that species. They also have a fairly long tail. Sometimes people get confused when they see a cat, especially if it's low light, nighttime. It can be a little hard to tell what you're looking at. But a bobcat tail is short. That's how they got their name bobcat. People felt that their tails were bobbed or cut short. They do have a tail, but their tail will never reach the ground. It's never that long. They can also vary a bit in color. They can be kind of a reddish color, like the one I posted earlier. That's a bobcat that lives at the zoo in North Carolina. Typically, the bobcats in like the southern portion tend to be a little more red. The bobcats in the northern range of where they live tend to be a little more gray. But they all kind of also have kind of that tan thing and can vary a bit in color different times of the year for certain individuals. They can weigh between 11 and 30 pounds, so they can have a pretty big weight range as well. Again, the hotter climate bobcats are going to be a little lighter weight and a little bit smaller. Bobcats also have usually black spots or stripes, or both, on their necks and on their legs, with kind of a white fur on their necks and belly. They also, around their cheeks, have like extra hair here. That's called a facial ruff. That's probably one of the biggest distinguishing things between them and like a house cat or other, like a mountain lion. Those cats don't have that. They also have little tufts on their ears of hair that hang off, although not as pronounced as their close relative, the lynx. We'll talk a little bit more about lynx today, and also we'll do an episode on lynx sometime in the future. What else? Bobcats usually eat things like rabbits, birds, squirrels, other rodents, things like mice, rats, and occasionally we'll go after something bigger, like a small deer. That's usually going to be like a baby deer or in some places where the adult deer don't get very big, or if it's a big bobcat and a not so big deer, that can work out to their advantage as well. Bobcats are stealthy hunters. They are very, very good at being quiet. That's why a lot of people don't see them very often. They're very quiet. They blend in really, really well with their earth tone coloring, and they're pretty quiet. They move very quietly. One of the things that helps them to be very quiet as they move, as they walk, their back foot steps into the exact same place that their front foot had been. That really helps as they're moving through like a place where there may be sticks on the ground kind of thing. They've already watched so they don't step on a stick or a crackly leaf with their front feet, and they know to put their back feet in those same spots as they walk along. They're not going to snap any little twigs or rustle any leaves that might alert their prey that they are there. They also kind of will sneak up on their prey and then do what is called a pounce, where they kind of jump up in the air and then down really fast on whatever they're going after. You may have seen video footage of this, specifically when they're hunting little rodents or possibly rabbits in like a snow setting. They like to video that. I'll be sharing some of those type of videos later today on the Facebook page. They're also very fast runners. They've been clocked at nearly 30 miles an hour, so they can be pretty quick, and they are excellent climbers. I've seen photos of them pretty high up in trees, up on people's roofs, in the desert, climbing the big saguaro cactus in Arizona and Mexico. So they are very good at getting out of the way of anything that's bigger or may cause harm to them. They have to be concerned about things like mountain lions, possibly coyotes, in areas of their range, wolves or bears. So they're kind of one of those middle of the road predators that has to be wary of bigger things coming after them as well. Not that those bigger predators would usually try to eat them, but they will try to kill them to get rid of them because they are kind of a competition. Bobcats are mostly solitary. They're typically alone, other than when it's a mom raising her kittens, or the kittens may stay together for a short time after they are no longer with their mom until they get just a bit bigger. They are mostly either nocturnal or, depending on the season and their range, crepuscular. We've talked about that word before. That means they're active at dawn and again at dusk, so around sunrise and sunset is when they're really active. That's a common strategy for kind of medium-sized predators. That way they're not hunting when the other big guys are most active, and they're able to kind of take advantage of some better light conditions to finding their prey. Although as a cat, most cats have very good vision during the night, and bobcats certainly are no exception to that. When a mom bobcat is having babies, she is pregnant, or her gestation is typically between 60 and 70 days. They say the average is 62, in case you need to be precise on that. Typically it's 2 to 4 kittens that are born. She has a little den site where they will stay for the first couple weeks. Typically that's under a big rock, under some bushes, or in a little cave, in a hollow log, any place where they're a little more protected from the weather and possibly anything that may try to hurt or kill them. Once they're maybe 2 or 3 weeks old, they'll start to follow her. She'll still be nursing them for about 2 months, but they'll start to follow her out of the den a little bit more on hunting. She may try to keep them back or hide them so they don't make too much noise. But their time together is pretty short. Some of the bigger animals stay a little longer, but bobcats usually only stay with their mom between 9 and 12 months. By the time they reach their first birthday, they're on their own. So pretty quick at growing up, pretty short childhood. One thing that's pretty cool about bobcats, and this is true in some other cat species, particularly I know it's true in tigers, on the back of their ears, there's little white spots, and that way if they're out at night, the babies can usually see the white spots on their mom's ears, and that helps them to know where she's going so they can follow her a little easier. Tigers have the same thing. Those white ear spots are very good at the babies being able to track and follow their moms. Bobcats are typically territorial, so they kind of define a territory. They'll patrol the edges of their territory often, marking that with scent. That means pooping and peeing in the same places to let other neighboring bobcats know this space is taken. It's taken by they can communicate through that, whether it's a male or a female that has that space. And also, if it's a female, she can communicate through that she is looking to breed, or if she has kittens already. And most bobcats are very respectful of those those territory boundaries as they're journeying. And if it's an occupied space, they'll just kind of keep moving along. They won't try to investigate further. So they sent Mark to communicate for the most part in close proximity. If they come face to face or closer with each other, they do use body positionings and facial expressions to communicate. And they do make some vocalizations, although those are a bit rare. They aren't too vocal with each other, although they do make a couple of different sounds. Bobcats can live between about 15 years in the wild, which is pretty good time. In a zoo setting, they can live into their 20s. There's some world record holder that claims that their bobcat in a zoo lived to be 34, which is pretty astonishing. That's a very long time for any cat species to live, but apparently it has happened. I know in my time at the Phoenix Zoo, we had a bobcat that lived into her mid-20s at the Phoenix Zoo. So she had a very long life. And in a zoo setting, they have a pretty easy life. They don't have to hunt for their food. They don't get hurt by their prey who's trying to kick them or defend themselves. They also don't have to worry about competing with other animals or other predators. And if they have a medical issue, they can get veterinary care. So animals in zoos typically live longer. Bobcats are definitely one of those. Now here in North America, they do have a close relative called the Canadian lynx. Lynx typically live further north, and as their name implies, they are the Canadian lynx. They live more in Canada and up through Alaska, although they are found in many of the northern, or several of the northern states as well, typically in the northern Rocky Mountains and in some of the areas in New England and the Great Lakes. Lynx are about twice the size of a bobcat. They have much bigger, very furry paws because they typically live in areas that are very cold with a lot of snow. They also have longer legs, so they can move through the snow very well, and they have more defined, bigger tufts of hair on their ears. Now there are also other species of lynx in the world. So there are a couple different species of lynx in Europe and Asia. And it's still an ongoing debate whether a cat in Africa called the caracal, if it is a lynx or if it is something else. But we'll talk about those in future critter chats. There is sometimes some confusion of if you see an animal in the wild, if it's a bobcat or if it's a lynx. Odds are it's a bobcat, unless it's very, very large and if you're in a cold place. There is a restoration, reintroduction project going on in Colorado with Canadian lynx, so I know that they do exist there, and in some of those states around Colorado up through Montana, Wyoming, that kind of thing. My experience with bobcats has been a wide variety of different things. All as an adult, I never really experienced much with them as a kid, although I did see them in zoos on occasion. I never saw one in the wild until I was an adult. The first bobcat I saw in the wild was in my neighborhood in Phoenix. I was walking my dogs. I saw a cat in a storm drain. In Phoenix, they get crazy amounts of rain during the late summer called monsoons. It's a lot of water very fast. So in the neighborhoods, they have very tall curbs, and under those curbs, there's a big place for the water to go when it rains. And those storm drains are open pretty big, like this big. and there was a cat in there looking out at us one morning as I walked my dogs. And as I got closer, I could see it had those little ruff of hair on its cheeks, and it was in fact a bobcat staring my dogs and I down. My dogs are not big. They're probably the same size as the bobcat. The bobcat did not try to threaten us. It did not try to run. It did not make any noise. It just stared very intently. And when my dogs got close and I realized it was a bobcat, I pulled their leashes back and we went on our way, leaving the animal alone. I would recommend that if you ever encounter a wild animal, especially a predator, that is something you do as well. Keep your distance. You'll be better off. During my time at the LA Zoo, I also interacted or saw bobcats on occasion. Not bobcats that belonged to the zoo, but bobcats that were wild, that lived at the zoo or around the zoo. I remember one morning as I was walking into the zoo very early in the morning, as I walked past the flamingo exhibit, my footsteps and walking through startled a bobcat that was pretty big, bigger than I expected in LA. And it jumped over the hedge out of the flamingo exhibit, crossed the road in front of me, and ran up the hillside. It was a little surprising to me. I don't know if it was necessarily waiting for the flamingos to come out for the day. Certainly the keepers clean their exhibit and do a lot of work in the exhibit before the flamingos come on exhibit. But that is why the flamingos go into a very safe spot during the night. Because at many zoos, including the Los Angeles Zoo, which is surrounded by a very large park, wild animals often visit the zoo, including things like bobcats, also coyotes, and if you listen to my critter chat about mountain lions, I talk about the mountain lion that visited the LA Zoo. So they are around in very large urban areas like Los Angeles. I also saw them several times outside the LA Zoo in some of the surrounding foothills. I know here in my neighborhood, I don't think anyone in my neighborhood real close by has seen bobcats, but I know within a mile or two towards the hills, people do see them from time to time. If you live in an area where you are close to open space, or even things like a golf course, a nature preserve, a little forested area, and if you have a small dog or cat, I would highly recommend that you keep them in at night, and if they need to go out to use the restroom, that you go with them, that you turn on lights, that you stay close by, because something like a bobcat who could be in your yard could cause some problems. So I would be very cautious if I were you. I know that I often see people posting signs about cats or dogs gone missing, and there's a wide variety of situations that could be, but I am not going to be shy about saying that it could be a bobcat, coyote, or mountain lion could have done something to those missing cats or dogs and been the reason why they are no longer around. Be cautious, be safe, keep your pets in. For bobcats, with their threats, they are listed as least concern. It is estimated that there are over 1 million bobcats in the United States, with their great adaptations to a wide variety of habitat, plus healthy populations in both Mexico and Canada. They are not in danger in any way. They are, however, still trapped and hunted legally for their fur. Many places in the world still use fur in things like fashion, putting it on trims of coats or hats, gloves. Particularly places in Europe and Asia still use a lot of fur, although in the US it is done less. Some of those furs are still sourced in the US. In 2013, the price for a bobcat fur was about $550 per animal for one bobcat fur. And in that year, over 65,000 bobcat furs were exported from the United States. So they are still definitely hunted and trapped for their fur. There are efforts to try to change that, but so far the people who make those decisions feel that it is not endangering the bobcat population, that the bobcat population is very robust, and that there are not threats for them being endangered. So for the time being, they are still legally hunted and trapped for their furs in many parts of the United States. Excuse me. Another problem facing bobcats is accidental poisoning. This is very common for many medium-sized predators in and around places where people live. If you put out poison for, let's say, mice or rats in your yard or in your around your house, that can have a negative effect on many members of the food chain up and down. So if a rat eats some poison and then runs off and then gets eaten by a bobcat or a hawk or an owl or many other species that may try to eat that rat, they could get that poison inside of them, and it can cause very significant health risk and even death if they eat enough of it. It's a fairly common thing for urban predators to struggle with the side effects of poisoning. If you have a problem with rodents like mice or rats, I would recommend finding a way other than poison to try and get rid of them. Poison is bad. It causes lots of negative reactions up and down the food chain. So I would highly recommend you find another way. For protecting bobcats and moving forward to protect all wild animals, let's just remember important places that protect wild spaces. So our special shout out today are the national parks and forests system that we have here in the United States. They provide a very important refuge for a lot of wild animals. Here by where I live in Los Angeles, we have the Santa Monica Mountains that is a protected recreational area, and many bobcats thrive there. I'll be posting an article that talks a little bit about the tracking and the science that they've been doing with some urban and near urban bobcat populations. That's pretty interesting. That is what I have to share with you today on this very happy Catterday about bobcats, the most abundant wildcat here in the United States. As always, this episode and all episodes of Critter Chat are shared on Facebook and YouTube daily and uploaded to the Instagram, as well as onto my website at jeremythezoonerd.com, so you can check them out there. I'll be posting additional information about bobcats on the Facebook profile later today. Feel free to check that out. As always, feel free to like, follow, subscribe, and share any of my Zoo Nerd content with family, friends, and anyone else who might enjoy it. And until Monday, be happy, be healthy, be safe. I'll see you Monday. Bye.